Welcome to Ruud's History and Philosophy vlog. In this episode we are going to delve into a military combat elite. Military history sometimes degenerates into a frantic search for so-called elite troops. There is some confusion about what is considered an elite outfit due to different criteria like high morale, physical features, or battlefield performance. In this podcast, I would like to go deeper into the phenomenon of the military elite and try to come with some definition. First, there is the word elite. This word is French and is derived from the Latin verb eligere, which means to choose, to elect. This is a good starting point in my opinion. An elite is selected from the available manpower rather than allocated from the general draft. The selection criteria can, however, differ. Often elite soldiers are selected on the basis of physical fitness, but other criteria can apply, like political reliability or physical features. A good example of the latter is the regiment of Potsdam Giants, the Guard regiment of the Prussian kings in the 18th century, which consisted of exceptionally tall men. The example of the Potsdam Giants shows that an elite is not necessarily a military skillful elite in combat. Guardsmen are usually selected from political, reliable and handsome men, but that does not make them an elite unit on the battlefield. That's why I have chosen to use the term military combat elite. A military combat elite consists of soldiers which are selected for combat purposes, like marksmanship, stamina, and are trained differently from regular soldiers to serve in dedicated elite units. These units are by their elite nature expected to outperform regular units and go beyond the call of duty when that is expected from them. There is an argument to make to take battlefield performance into consideration. This is tricky, however. Elite units can't be held accountable for a poor battle plan or a deployment which does not fully exploit their specific skills. Sometimes elite units are pressed into battle for the lack of other available troops or deployed into a situation that nullifies their skills. A good example is the Battle of Saule in 2036, when the monastic knights of the Sword Brothers were almost all slaughtered, because they were forced into combat before the start of the campaigning season by their fellow crusaders. The boggy soil of the Baltic was not solidly frozen, which meant that they could not perform their specialty, the mounted charge. Another trap, in my opinion, is to follow the designation of a type of unit as an indication for military combat elite. The above-mentioned example of guardsmen is a fine example. The history of the British Guards regiments go back to the 17th century, but during that history they were not always the military combat elite which they are today. During the First World War, they were deployed as regular infantry, for example. There is also a tendency within armies to give units honorific titles to instill a sense of military pride. A good example is the phenomenon of guards armies within the Red Army during the Second World War. These did not consist of selected men, nor did these men have special training or were they deployed for special operations. It also happens that a recognized military combat elite degenerates into regular army outfits or even substandard troops. This happened to the German parachute units during the Second World War. Between 1935 and 1943, they were selected men who were purposefully trained and deployed. After 1943, they were drawn into a regular combat role, and as a result of mounting losses, the physical fitness requirements were dropped and the parachute element was diminished in the training. In the beginning of 1944, most soldiers in the parachute units never made a combat parachute drop, and in the end units were even raised from raw recruits. Another point I want to make is that a military combat elite is not always created in peacetime. It can also come into existence during a war and be disbanded after the conflict. A good example is the Italian Reparto d'Assalto, the so-called Arditi, the daring ones. They were developed in the trench warfare of World War I in 1916 and disbanded after that war. The Arditi were selected soldiers who got special training and were deployed in their own units to perform feats which other units were not deemed capable of: the storming, taking and holding of the enemy trench line in close combat. The last point I want to make is that we should not make the mistake to distinguish elite troops in order to diminish the status of other armed forces. Elite troops always operate within the larger framework of the armed forces as a whole and seldom win victories all by itself. Regular units and regular soldiers are capable of great feats, and most wars are fought and won by regulars. The worst mistake a general can make is to underestimate their enemy. To summarize, an elite unit consists of selected men which are trained for a specific purpose and are expected to perform beyond the call of duty and better than regular army units. This episode is the introduction of small summaries of specific units which are deemed military combat elite, for example, a particular regiment or a division. The purpose of this series, of which this episode is an introduction, is to analyze the difference between the general perception of these units and the reality of training and battlefield performance of these units. The layout of each episode is a history of a unit within a specific war. We hope you will enjoy watching and listening to the series as much as we enjoyed producing them.